6 measurable milestones, 5 missions, 3 foundations, 2 plans for change, and Alan Partridge in a pear tree.
4.
We've got to get through dealing with a £22 billion black hole. And there's just so much to do.
3.
Labour's political parlour game of talking down the economy ahead of the 31st of October budget to try and manage expectations actually did talk down the economy.
2.
I think I could have a second career as a bodybuilder.
1. We have liftoff.
Welcome once again to Planet Normal, a Telegraph podcast with Alison Pearson.
Hello.
And me, Liam Halligan. Christmas is coming, the geese are getting fat. But not you, Alison. You're getting thin. As your Ozempic frenzy reaches year-end, fueled by Fatty's Little Helper, your weight loss programme has become the stuff of media legend. But Alison, the co-pilot's gaining. If you can gain in a weight loss competition, no Ozempic for me as I shed the pounds, fueled only by determination and fear of an early death. Our weight loss competition continues, and we'll check in again after Christmas, so go easy on the mince pies and brandy butter as the festivities begin. For this is the last Planet Normal of 2024. No! Oh yes it is, because being right about everything all the time is tiring, and we need a break. And what a year it's been. Keir Starmer became Prime Minister in July after Labour's loveless landslide, his 170-seat plus Commons majority based on just 33% of the votes, on a 60% turnout. Just 1 in 5 of the electorate backed Labour, and it's clear the party's suffering in the polls. We'll be hearing later from Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. Sort of. 2024 was the year of Pearson Gate, when 2 hapless Essex cops turned up at your front door and were given a verbal shoeing. Or maybe it was a slippering, as you were in your bathrobe. Accused of a so-called crime, you went into fight or flight mode, as much of the public backed you and your right to free speech, even though some so-called journalists seemed not to have read, let alone understood, any Orwell. And now, with well over 13,000 NCHIs recorded over the last year, the magnificent Donna Jones, for it is she, Hampshire's Police and Crime Commissioner, has weighed in on the side of common sense, calling existing practice absurd. There's lots going on. Will 2024 go down as the year when it became okay at bien pensant dinner parties, the type we never get invited to, Alison, to question net zero? A scandal. What would Greta Doomgoblin say? What are the Conservatives up to under Kemi Badenoch, who became leader last month? And can they get back into contention, or will reform eat the Tories' lunch? And the economy's creaking, with inflation sharply up, as some of us warned. Christmas is indeed coming, the geese are getting fat. Please put a penny in the old man's hat. But perhaps, as economic growth slows, the old man needs a bit more than a penny. It's Christmas, after all. So, Alison, you were lifting weights in the gym this morning. Planet Normal listeners will be interested to know. How are the biceps?
Tricep dips, I say to you.
You're doing tricep dips.
I think I could have a second career as a bodybuilder. It's a change of pace, isn't it, really? But
who would have thunk it this time last year that you'd have been doing tricep dips in the gym of an Essex market town?
I know.
Surfing the wave of public approval in your NCHI battle.
I think for the true effect, you need to have one of those mahogany spray tans, don't you? So you can see the rippling biceps. Can I just say that every time you refer to my weight loss, you're shearing perilously close, Halligan, to a
non-crime
hate incident. I mean, really, I should say to listeners that when the co-pilots saw me recently at a party, not a bien pensant one, obviously, full of a rough old crowd, your amazing, kind and appraising compliment was, "There's nothing left of you." That's literally what you said.
Turn sideways and you have to join the dots.
There's nothing left of you.
Alison Pearson, you are a mere slip of a Welsh lass now. My God.
I am a slip.
And you feel good for it, right?
Yeah, 2 stone down. I think
2 stone down.
2 stone down. I think apart from the obvious sort of aesthetic benefits and being able to fit into clothes and so on. But I think really, Liam, they're saying this Monjaro, it's phenomenal for all the anti-inflammation, and inflammation turns out to be the thing that causes all the really bad things that can happen to us, like heart disease and cancer. So the bad news is I shall probably be around with you for some time. And I think the gammy hip has stopped niggling as well.
Fantastic. Well as popping pills, I know, and I referred to it just then, you have been working tremendously hard in the gym. You've been watching very carefully what you eat. And I think it's been a huge success for you. And certainly it's given you a big, not just a health kick, it's given you a big psychological lift as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And I think with the whole police business and so on, I think it felt nice to have control over one area of one's life. It was something that was positive and was going well when all these various currents I couldn't control that were swirling around. But we can say, can't we, Liam, that one small victory this week for Pearson kind, as you alluded to in your intro, Lord Herbert, the chair of the College of Policing, has indicated that the government should consider scrapping non-crime hate incidents after inconsistency and controversy. What would the controversy have been generated by, co-pilot?
Can't think. Some arsey Welsh journalist who poshed herself up at Cambridge, perhaps.
Yeah, poshed herself up, became middle class almost overnight. Yeah, so look, we don't want to jump the gun because we know that Suella Braverman introduced a code of conduct governing non-crime hate incidents where police were supposed to use common sense and ask themselves, is this in the public interest to go and harass this member of the public? So they didn't pay a blind bit of notice to that. But it is interesting, I think now this very senior guy at the College of Policing saying that non-crime hate incidents had become a distraction that were undermining public confidence in the police. He can say that again. He said, we need to prevent harm. We do need to ensure that minorities are protected. But on the other hand, we must ensure that police are not drawn into the trivial. Police should be able to say, we're sorry, we can understand you find that offensive, but it's not a matter for us. And as Planet Normal listeners will know, we continue to get absolutely fatuous examples that would be funny, Liam, if they weren't sinister.
Yeah.
They're just absolutely ludicrous. And I think that, as senior female officer wrote to us last week, less confident officers just don't bin things because they see the word racial and they get very, very worried. So it may be, and fingers crossed, not just fingers crossed, but a very important collaboration we've had with Toby Young, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. I've been raising some money for the FSU, and Toby and the union are weighing in now on lots of these really unbelievable and upsetting cases where completely normal Britons, respectable people, are being accused of stirring up racial hatred because in the case of Alan, who we mentioned last week, elderly gentleman just told a bunch of Asian lads to clear off without using any racist language at all. And it's incredibly upsetting for law-abiding people to be told that they've got one of these sinister and invisible black marks against their name.
That can affect your employment prospects. It's absolutely crazy. And we should say Lord Herbert is Nick Herbert, the former Tory MP for Arundel and South Downs. A good bloke, I'd say, someone I've known a long time, decent guy, and good that decency and common sense looks about to prevail here. And it would have been nice, I think, if some mainstream politicians had led the way after your highlighting of the lunacy of NCHIs.
Well, they did, to be fair. So Nigel Farage.
No, sure.
Kemi Badenoch was massively supportive behind the scenes and in other ways as well. So I had a lot of people getting in touch and really backing me up. So I think, and full credit, all credit to the amazing Telegraph news desk, like a dog with a bone, aren't they? That sort of set them on Essex Police. And I think, it was interesting to see. We certainly caused discomfort and embarrassment and highlighted something that just shouldn't be happening in our country. You know, it's
absolutely.
Stasi-like behaviour, but little victory for Telegraph and Planet Normal if we can get the police focusing on things like actual crime rather than the imaginary kind. Before we go into the 5 months of a Labour government, let's not forget 6 measurable milestones, 5 missions, 3 foundations, 2 plans for change, and Alan Partridge in a pear tree. That's Sir Keir Starmer's mantra. 5 months of this Labour government feels like 5 bloody years, doesn't it?
I certainly think that they are making some big mistakes. I've always admitted that this was a tough inheritance. There wasn't a £22 billion black hole. That's completely disingenuous nonsense. And Labour's political parlour game of talking down the economy ahead of the 31st of October budget to try and manage expectations actually did talk down the economy. You know,
Yes.
When you're in opposition, you can say what you want. No one cares. In government, when you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer saying the economy is really bad, guess what? People don't invest. Guess what? People don't spend. Guess what? Growth slows down. We've now had 2 successive months of negative growth in this country. And this was meant to be the great post-inflation bounce back. This was meant to be when the economy really got motoring. This was meant to be when we had successive interest rate cuts, which some of us warned wouldn't happen and were laughed at for our trouble. And now here we are. Inflation came out, the number Wednesday morning before we recorded Planet Normal, 2.6%, up from 2.3% in October. That's the November number, 2.6%, way above the 2% target now. There will be no interest rate cut in December. There will be no interest rate cut in January or February or March, even in my view. In fact, and I've written this several times now, and I say this with regret, and I feel very much for firms that are indebted, households that are indebted. I reckon the next move in interest rates could be up because inflation is gaining pace. Again, I don't like saying this stuff, but I'd rather be accused of being miserable than being accused of being wrong. You have these tax rises coming in April. You have increases in the minimum wage, which governments of all stripes likes to announce because business pays. They are massively inflationary. They go straight onto a firm's cost base. Those cost increases are obviously to some degree passed on because businesses have to survive. I am concerned about inflation, and it's not just me, it's plenty of people in those pesky bond markets. And since this inflation number came out, government borrowing costs have spiked up. We are now consistently above where we were in the aftermath of Liz Truss's mini budget. And as Liz Truss rightly says, where is the outrage now, BBC? Where are all the calls for the Prime Minister to be drummed out of office? The bond markets, those gnomes of Zurich, as we used to say in the 70s, that's probably a non-crime hate issue now, at least ducks in a row. They determine what happens when governments overspend. And yes, the Tories overspent, but Labour have made it much, much worse. Their difficult situation that they inherited, they escalated that by borrowing and spending much, much more. Massive public sector pay rises, instantly granted, without condition. And guess what? The markets think that's going to happen again and again and again. Because when you have governments who always reach for the country's coffers to get themselves out of trouble, markets get worried because it's by borrowing from financial markets that governments make ends meet. And we are borrowing tens of billions of pounds now, some months. We are paying 80 to 100 billion pounds a year in debt interest on government debt. Absolutely massive. The Tories are guilty, but Labour have made it worse. I'll get this out of the way early because I want to have some Christmas fun on this podcast, but that is my big concern going into the new year, rising borrowing costs, and it's not just me.
I think you've been very obviously well ahead of the curve on this. And I
Say
think
that again.
I don't wish to say it twice. One compliment per podcast.
One compliment per year. God, it's a good job I'm not needy.
I think it's interesting that they do feel out of their depth, but also Labour feels like they are the nasty party now. You remember that the Tories had that.
Theresa May's sobriquet.
Yeah, held the crown of that. But obviously we've been seeing the farmers with this inheritance tax, which doesn't seem to be going to raise any money. So it feels like pure dogma, really.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the economy. I've written this week about the VAT on private school fees, which again seems to be being inflicted at the really cruel time, which is coming into effect in the beginning of January, halfway through, well into the second term of the school year. What's that about? I mean, why are they doing that to children?
And that was after an absolute undertaking from the government that it would come in at the start of an academic year. As a school governor myself at 2 independent schools, I can tell you the chaos that caused. We had heads coming back from summer holidays, senior management teams coming back from summer holidays, trying to reassure parents. Everyone thought this would come in September 2025. But then there was a space in the news grid. Labour wanted to throw a bone to the hard left, and they said, no, we're going to bring it in January to stitch up the independent schools as much as we can. But look, independent schools are often run by professional people. It's what they do. They roll with the punches. But what about the kids? Because most kids at independent schools are from families that are paying those hefty fees, not out of compound interest or returns on capital. They're paying those fees out of wages, post-tax wages. They're struggling to take the choice to educate their children independently. This adds 20% to those school fees. Schools are absorbing some of that, but for many schools, it's impossible to absorb much of it because most of their cost base anyway is wages. The wages are going up, employer, national insurance, of course, business rates, the regime is changing. We're going to lose a lot of independent schools because of this. We're already seeing some go by the wayside. They're often very important local employers, and the kids, many of whom will have been really traumatized by lockdown. You're going to get kids now, we're already seeing it, who are having to leave the schools in which they are thriving, schools they love, because their parents simply cannot deal with the stress of finding yet more money. And this is going to raise almost no money because so many parents are going to have to go back to the state sector where there aren't places. You're going to have kids being educated in porter cabins and worse in order to accommodate the backwash from this deeply ideological move by Labour. And the idea that you can put VAT on school fees, you can only do that, ironically, because we've left the European Union. Because in Keir Starmer's beloved European Union, you can't tax education. Hurrah for that. That's one good aspect about the European Union. And now Labour's going to be horsed by its own petard because it's pretty clear to me, co-pilot, that some big beefy schools are not going to take this lying down, and they are going to try and do this policy under the European Convention of Human Rights. Starmer is determined to stay in. So for a former director of public prosecutions, he never mentions it, does he? His legal strategy is looking a bit wanting at this point.
It's also going to be chaos, isn't it? Because Surrey is one of the councils that's admitted it's run out of space to take in any of these private school children. And they're forecasting there will be no vacancies for pupils in years 9, 10 or 11 next September. So you've got about 2,500 disrupted children floating around without a place. And as you say, Liam, local authorities have a statutory duty to provide education to each child. And in fact, private school parents unburden the state to the tune of about £4.5 billion.
Because they pay their taxes for their school place they don't take up and then they pay again.
So the idea that this is, I mean, in fact, I'm, really, really very, very critical of Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education, not that she deserves that title. And she posted on X a very, very sort of jealous, nasty class war thing. Oh, our state schools need teachers more than private schools need embossed stationery. Feel Our children need mental health support more than private schools.
Spend a bit less on diversity officers across Whitehall then.
So she's reaching for these tropes, isn't she? Swimming pools, astroturf, pitches, a really vindictive tone there from the woman who's supposed to be in charge of the education of all children, not just the ones in the state system. And in fact, Liam, this vindictive tone triggered a huge amount of abuse under her comments on social media, really unpleasant about children. Oh, it's terrible. Parents may no longer be able to send Tarquin or Tarquinetta to a private school, entitled twats, they said, and then, if any of the children are upset, they can cry themselves better in daddy's swimming pool with the used fivers he didn't want to pay in tax. I mean, this is just sort of naked kind of dogma, isn't it? Real unpleasantness.
That's not what independent education is about, Alison. Yes, of course, Britain boasts some of the so-called great public schools, the Tom Brown School Days schools, which attract people from all across the world. And of course, those schools are used by some pretty wealthy, some pretty commercially successful families out of their, in general, post-tax income. Most private schools are places where people are first or at best second generation users of independent education. They're local schools serving local communities. And by the way, as I know, and this is why I feel so strongly about this, these schools give out many, many bursaries and scholarships each year. I benefited from one of them at the age of 10, as I mentioned from time to time. And that's my animus in this, because I know from my knowledge of the independent school sector, as a governor, as I said, that many schools, even some of the really wealthy schools, are having to, through gritted teeth, literally, they don't want to do it, rein in those bursaries and scholarships for life-changing experiences for gifted children on merit, their performances in entrance exams, in order to try and absorb some of this extra 20%, a tax on parents for having the audacity to want to choose how they educate their children. Bridget Phillipson was looking a little bit sheepish at the Spectator Christmas party, but she still turned up, didn't she?
Let's just contemplate Labour and hypocrisy, those words never too far away in a sentence about schools. So in 1974, a boy called Keir Starmer won a place at Reigate Grammar School, which became independent while he was there. Now, in order to avoid disrupting Keir's and the other boys' education, existing pupils were allowed to continue with their fees paid by the local council. Well, there's a thing, isn't it?
Unreal.
Extending some charity and compassion to children like him, but not to the 35,000 kids who are going to be causing chaos in our already overburdened and underperforming system. One question I wanted to ask you this week before I forget, what are the odds on us being in recession by June, co-pilot?
Well, a recession, the technical definition, of course, is 2 successive quarters. That's 3-month periods of economic contraction. So that is GDP, gross domestic product, all the transactions in economy in a given time period falling in value. We've had 2 successive months of GDP contraction. I don't think we're heading for a recession because there is growth in other parts of the world. America's going gangbusters based in large part on cheap electricity. By the way, American electricity prices are less than half of those paid by firms and households in this country. High power prices are a big reason why we have inflation rising in general in Britain. So I don't think we're going into a recession now. I think we can be in danger of talking ourselves into a recession. Labour, I think, did a lot to bring about this slowdown in growth in October and November by being overly bearish for what they thought was political advantage in the run-up to their budget. But we have still got a lot of these budget measures to come in, these big taxes to come in the new financial year in April 2025, not least the 1.2 percentage point increase in employer national insurance, which I know many companies are already putting into their calculations when they set their prices. And those price implications ripple right the way up the supply chain and are felt in the shops. I think the only chance, obviously I don't want it to happen, the danger of recession would be magnified if we had ongoing geopolitical angst. And that really is the big imponderable going into 2025. My concerns about inflation and interest rates in the UK, the next move being up, controversial statement, we'll see who's right, are predicated partly on geopolitics. You know, you and I talk a lot, sometimes we talk about it on the podcast, about Russia-Ukraine, about what's going on in the Middle East. This brings us to the Trump presidency, of course. We're now in this sort of lame duck period you have in the US at the end of an election where the incumbent basically has no power. The incoming president prepares before taking office in January the following year, which of course is January 2025. If he imposes big tariffs on global trade, and he's threatening to impose tariffs, double-digit tariffs, these are taxes on imports in both Canada and Mexico, as well as China, then that could be recessionary. That could really stop the world economy stone dead in its tracks. These tariffs he's talking about, students of history, are commensurate in size with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs in the early 1930s, which many Planet Normal listeners will have written about, as I did, in their history O-level.
We're going to be spoilt this week because it's Christmas, so you can have 2 Velma stats.
Hey!
So I do think people may have noticed a lot of people are talking about having a more modest Christmas this year.
Exactly.
And no surprise, because over the 3-year period between May 2021 and May 2024, UK consumer prices increased by 20.8%.
Yeah.
And we've been saying for quite a long time that even though prices are supposed to be under control, I think a lot of people feel that their shopping basket is just absolutely exorbitant. And a lot of people have been saying they've been helping family members out who are a bit short, Liam. I mean, things are not great. And then the other thing, which I think looking forward to 2025, we've already, you've interviewed a fantastic car retailer. And I think 2025, we're not only going to see the wheels coming off the electric vehicles market, I think the devastation wrought by the heedless pursuit of the net zero target in the face of all common sense is going to be laid bare. Now, here is a great Velma stat. So the UK's energy import bill surged to 117 billion last year. And that was compared to, in 2021, 54 billion. Now, that's a new report I read from Offshore Energies UK. Who thought, when we first got together on the podcast, that Halligan would have me reading a business outlook report from Offshore Energies UK? But it's the first time UK annual energy import costs have broken the 100 billion barrier. And we are looking, apparently, at further import bills in future years, especially if the windfall tax imposed by our crazy government on UK oil and gas operators remains in place. And that equates to 4,200 quid per British household. And this is something, Liam.
Alison, you are now marauding into my territory, right? There are limits, okay? I'm the economist on this podcast. My God, you're trying to emasculate me.
No, I want to make this final point because I am obsessed with the fact that
What about my needs?
Norway and Britain's oil and gas fields are neighbouring in the North Sea.
Yeah.
And energy imports from Norway have gone from 13 billion in 2019 to 41 billion in 2022. We are giving Norway 41 billion quid for oil and gas, which we could get out of our own sea next to Norway's sea, right? It's the same sea. So this is almost half of the education budget, Liam, is going to Norway.
You sound like that Halligan bloke. My God, we're morphing into one person.
God forbid.
So that's Norway. It's got the 4th highest GDP per head in the world. and we're 20th, and we are basically giving them money. Who'd have thought that we'd have been holier than thou Norway, a country with massive wealth, a huge sovereign wealth fund. And it's not just the Labour. The Tories introduced this mad windfall tax on the North Sea.
I know.
Completely crazy. And that's why, and Labour, of course, are making it much worse, because for Ed Miliband, life is all about just ideology, party positioning, and being to the left, so-called, of the Tories. But you know what? A lot of this net zero stuff is not to the left at all. It's Islington Labour pitted against Red Wall Labour. And my mind, heart, soul is with Red Wall Labour. You have very serious people, very skilled orators and strategic advisors at the top of the GMB union, the third biggest, at the top of Unite, the second biggest. They are absolutely livid about net zero, because this stuff is now costing lots and lots and lots of skilled blue collar jobs in parts of the country where there are not that many well paid jobs, unfortunately. And we have almost 1 million people working in our car industry, and these mad fines for companies who are trying to sell petrol and diesel cars and are trying to sell EVs, but they can't because the public doesn't want them, is threatening our million-strong workforce in our car industry. And mad North Sea oil drilling bans are threatening the jobs of the 1 million-plus people working in our oil and gas and broader energy complex. It is insane. Ed Miliband, he's out of control. He's drunk on power, this guy. And here's a prediction. Put this in your Christmas stocking, right? Labour will use Syria, ongoing chaos in Syria, to diss Ed Miliband, who, of course, was Labour leader when the UK's Syria policy was formulated back in the day. They will use Syria and all other kinds of means to get rid of him. Ed Miliband will not be in place in the cabinet in his current role, I would say, by this spring.
As it's Christmas, co-pilot, we wanted to have a bit of light relief from all that gloom. And I thought a great guest for the rocket would be Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, somewhat unbelievably. But unfortunately, Ange was a bit busy trying on designer clothes bought for her by Lord Wide Ali. So instead, we've got someone who has given me so many laughs this year. Intel Lady is a satirist and performer who has a brilliant comic take on politics and current events. You can find her work on YouTube, TikTok, and X. Now, Liam, Intel Lady has formed a very intimate association with Angela Rayner. And indeed, she has been broadcasting a show, No Brainer with Angela Rayner, from a bunker under Whitehall, where Keir Starmer has told the Deputy Prime Minister she has to remain out of sight for her own good, obviously. And here's what happened when I caught up with Big Ange earlier this week. Welcome to Planet Normal, Angela. It's been 5 months since Labour won the general election. Now, some people have said it's the worst start ever for a new government. Do you think, Deputy Prime Minister, that's a bit unfair? And what are the big successes that you'd point to?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for having me on the show, Alison. And, you know, I think I would say it was definitely a little bit unfair. I think we have, what I've always said is we have hit the ground running, and really, I think us Labourers are doing fantastic. It's 5 months, and we have done more in 5 months than the Tories did in 14 years of failure. So I would say I think you can agree, we have defo outdone the Tories.
Well, yeah, I think that's true, definitely. Angela, I wonder how you're getting on with your cabinet colleagues. You've said that Sir Keir Starmer's having a mentee B. I believe that's Gen Z for mental breakdown. Keir's poll ratings are looking very bad. Why do you think people don't seem to take to him?
Well, I would say don't take any notice of the polls, because they're not based in reality. They're just based in people's offhand opinions and not facts. And we like to deal in facts. And the facts are that us Labourers have done an absolutely brilliant job. Our Keir inherited an absolute disaster due to 14 years of Tory failure and also a very unexpected and unexplained £22 billion black hole. So, people might be a little bit upset that we've had to take some extreme measures, but we didn't have much of a choice. And he's happy to take one for the team, Alison. He's happy to, if he's a little bit unpopular in the beginning, that's fine because he's got a lot up his sleeve. And, it's all positive. So we're not worried at this point. It's too early to do polls like that.
You think Keir Starmer is well suited to the leadership role, do you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just look at what he's doing on the world stage when he's meeting up with all the strong leaders of the world, like Justin Trudeau. I mean, did you see that meeting that they had? A couple of alphas sat there with the zero alcohol beer and just shooting the breeze and dressed all cash, the pair of them, and they really knew how to handle the press. Well, Justin just kept talking and talking. And then Keir said something very measured and calm. And then they said, now we're going to have a totally relaxed and not pre-planned meeting. So he's very relaxed on the world stage and people can see how genuine he is and that he's a man of the people, which is very important.
Coming to another of your colleagues, Rachel Reeves, the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer, has had a bit of a glow up, even experimenting, I noticed, with a bit of Rayner red in her bob. What do you make of Rachel's new look, Angela?
Well, I think it is absolutely fantastic. It was down to me. I'm going to take full credit for it because we actually changed her settings to glow up because at first she was a little bit very well put together. I'm not going to try and slag off our Rachel. She was very well put together, but she didn't have much pizzazz. So I am responsible, because they're charging pods down in the bunker with me at the moment. I'm responsible for changing the settings now. I had to do that a couple of weeks ago when I had gone off to meet the Pope, which we'll talk about later because that was fantastic. But I was asked by Erica, look, change your settings because every time she opens her mouth, she upsets somebody. So we've got PMQs coming up while you're away. Can you change the settings to nod instead of speak? So I did. I swapped them to nod and I overdid it. I had to just alter them a little bit when I got back because she was nodding so much. She set off Lucy Powell as well. She was going for it too. So we had to just settle it down, change the settings. But I had changed her settings to glow up, just to give her a little bit more pizzazz. I did put a little bit of colour in her hair, just to glamour up a little bit. And it worked because, honestly, people absolutely love our Rachel, especially when a settings are set to occasional response. I had to swap it because the nod was just ridiculous. I'd got that totally wrong. The following week, it was occasional response and slight mouth movement without actually adding any comments about anything because Erica was very strict about that. But it worked really well. So yeah, we're very happy with our Rachel. First ever woman Chancellor. Now we know what one of those is. Isn't that fantastic?
It really is. And I think you have got her looking almost human. It's quite realistic what you've achieved there. Can we just fill Planet Normal listeners in? Because you're actually, Keir has put you in a special underground bunker, hasn't he, Angela? And is that for your own protection, do you think? Or is that to get you out of the way? How would you see your exile in this bunker now?
Well, it's defo not to get me out of the way. That is not how Keir explained it to me. He said, look, obviously the public are getting, a little bit tetchy with one thing or another. There's a lot of far-right extremists all over the place, keep cropping up, and we need somewhere that us Labourers can go to be protected when things have got a bit airy out there. So I went in as an experiment and I said, are you sure you don't want me to stay? Because I'm quite happy at my mate's apartment. It's all above board. I've declared it. And he said, no, I'd like you to go down into the bunker and just kit it out, get it that this is your first housing project, Angela. And I went, oh, fair enough. I'll start at the bunker and work my way up. So I did, and we've got some beds in there. We've had a few in. We've had our David had to come down because he was very upset about Trump winning and the things that he'd unfortunately said several times over the years. And he had to walk some of it back, and he was a bit worried that the far-right extremists had come for him. So our Kia said, just put him down in the bunker for a bit. I've had our Sadiq down in the bunker for similar reasons. He was upset about, because he knows that Trump's going to come over and he's going to have to be there, although we are trying to arrange a fact-finding mission for our David, our Sadiq and our Ed. We were thinking of, when Trump comes over, just sending him off to Greenland to do a bit of climate change research. We thought that would be a good idea, just get him out the way, just while Trump's in town. But yeah, we've had a few, and obviously we've got our Rachel's charging pod is down there, and we just bob her on the pod at the end of PMQs, and she's quite happy down there. It's quite good to have the company. She doesn't talk much, so it's quite good for me to have the company.
While we're talking about Rachel, her budget for growth does seem to have upset quite a few people, the farmers, business owners, pensioners, employers. If there's a recession next year, Angela, and Rachel has to go, would you fancy having a go at the Chancellor of the Exchequer job yourself?
No, I am all about the houses. That's my area of expertise, and I think I just need to stay in my lane. And our Kia says, stay in your lane, Ange. Just stay where you are. And I'm happy to stay where I'm quite happy with everything that I'm doing and achieving right now. So I don't need to be changing my job. And I don't think Rachel is going to be changed. Just like, I didn't think that other members of us Labours would be chopping and changing and moving about. I don't think that Rachel is going anywhere. I think she's quite happy and she's doing really well. So nobody's going anywhere.
So a recent interview you did on Sky News with Sir Trevor Phillips caused a bit of a stir because you said there is a housing crisis, which is why you have to build 1.5 million new homes. But in the same interview, when Sir Trevor pointed out that a lot of those houses would go to immigrants, you said we've got lots of houses. Angela, can you clear this up for us? Have we got a lot of houses or a housing crisis?
Well, I just want to start by saying there's a bit of a backstory to this. So the night before that interview, I had been putting up my holiday decorations in the bunker, and I'd had a few Chevys to celebrate. And I was absolutely hanging the next day, and our Kia rang me up. He was off on his travels, he wasn't even here, and he said, look, you need to go and do an interview with Sir Trevor at Sky. And I said, when? And he said, well, now please. And I said, but I'm hanging, I haven't even had a glass of water yet. And he said, you're going to have to go, Angela, just, get yourself dressed and get yourself down there. So I thought, right, all right, fine. I really like Sir Trevor MacDonald. I think he's fantastic. He's a very good interviewer. So I was happy I got there. And then I realised that I got my Trevors mixed up. And so I was really stressed out, Alison. I didn't know what to do really. And I thought, well, I've just got to focus on all the positive things what us Labours have managed to do. And then he started saying things about houses, crisis, immigrants, this, that, and the other. And I thought, oh God, I was trying so hard to concentrate. And then I got myself in a bit of a pickle because I felt guilty about getting me Trevors mixed up. And that was all I could focus on. So words were said. Misinformation happened. It was not my fault. To be honest, if I had to blame anybody, I would blame the 14 years of Tory failure, because if it wasn't for what they had done, we wouldn't be in this mess with the houses in the first place. So that's where you need to start. Don't be having a go at me for saying one thing and then saying the opposite thing in the space of one sentence. Not my fault. It was not my fault. It was down to what the Tories have done. They've stressed me out, Alison.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, Angela. I think we've got that. Straight now. Now, you've come up with a very clever idea for overcoming environmental objections when the 1.5 million houses are built on the British countryside, and particularly on these rare newt habitats. Can you share that solution with us, Angela?
Well, this is an idea that I've had. I have had a little bit of advice from our Ken as well, because he loves newts.
Oh, yes.
And I build it for every house that I build. I am going to provide a comfortable underground newt tent to house all of the displaced and confused newts. And our Ken said it's a brilliant idea. He said, I don't think I've heard an idea quite as impressive as that from any of us Labourers before. That is, you're really onto something there, Angela. I said, thanks, Ken. So he's going to be working with me, and we are going to be providing comfortable underground newt tents.
Yes, so some listeners who are quite alert, they may see that the acronym formed by comfortable underground newt tents could be a bit problematic. Are you worried about that, Angela, at all?
Well, I don't know who this acronym is, but I'm working with Ken, so I'm quite happy with what we're doing.
Now, since you became Deputy Prime Minister, I must say you've worn some very striking outfits. There was the tangerine trouser suit, the trouser suit in a fashion-forward Domestos toilet cleaner green. And there has been a bit of a fuss over you receiving £3,550 of clothing from Lord Wahid Ali, which you did originally claim, Angela, was a donation in kind for undertaking parliamentary duties. Angela, does it bother you with your feminist principles when you accept handouts for designer clothing from a multimillionaire?
No, I don't think so. I think in order to be a feminist, you have to feel, it's about how you feel. And if you feel strong and independent and all about projecting that fantastic strength of a woman, now we know what one of those is, I think it's very important to look the part. And Lord Ali would agree with that. And he thinks that it's accentuating the feminism of my femininity. So he was happy to spend out. And, I got a lot of bargains in there. Got a couple of Dottie P suits and some Bon Marché dresses. So I don't really know why people are having a go. If your mate who believes in the same principles as you wants to shell out for a couple of dresses, a few frocks, then they should be allowed to do that, all in the name of being a very good feminist. So, yeah.
Does it bother you, coming back to this business of being a woman? So Sir Keir Starmer, your Prime Minister, your boss, he did say that 99% of women don't have a penis, which does leave a percentage that do. Where do you stand on women having penises, Angela, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I stand on knowing what I am, and our Rachel being the first, did I mention our Rachel being the first ever woman chancellor? And I think that's where the focus needs to go, because you can talk about percentages all day, every day, but the facts are the facts, and the facts are that us Labourers know what a woman is because we've got one as a chancellor now. So, I just think, don't nitpick about things that Keir has said in the past. Let's focus on the present.
Good idea. Now, can I ask you what Lord Ali's getting you for Christmas? Will there be, by any chance, some blankets to donate to all the freezing pensioners who have lost their winter fuel allowance under the Labour government?
They don't need blankets, Alison. I have got another, as well as the comfortable underground newt tents, I've got another initiative. So it's all about keeping yourself warm, and I was hoping that they would have seen the footage of me raving in Ibiza. So what I'd like them to do is, in order to keep themselves warm, is to have a daily rave in their living rooms, because it gets the circulation going. So that is my gift to all the pensioners, is rave to keep warm. I've got to think of a good strap line with that, because obviously we've got comfortable underground nute tents, but we need to do something to do with, I don't know, dance yourself warm or so. We'll think of something. We could come up with some brilliant names, but that's the idea. Yeah, that's my gift.
Yeah, all the octogenarians doing an Ibiza rave rather than having any coal.
That's it,
the
yeah.
idea,
Just get
is it?
yourself moving and get yourself warm. It's great, and it keeps you fit as well. It's dead good.
Angela, Nigel Farage is now your fellow MP in the House of Commons. I was wondering whether you and Nigel enjoyed a fag break together. And Nigel is very popular up north, up your way. Can you see his appeal? And do you think reform might come to mean that you lose your Ashton-under-Lyne seat?
I don't think I'm going to lose the seat, and I don't really go out on fag breaks with Nigel. It gets on my nerves. I try to avoid him at all costs, because he's got a real smugness about him that really gets on my nerves. I am not concerned about reform whatsoever. In fact, I don't even think about them, Alison. I don't give them a second thought, because they're no threat to us Labours, and they're no threat to the Tories. The Tories don't care about them. Us Labours don't care about them, and they'll be gone soon. So I'm not worried at all.
Now, you've called Conservative critics far-right adjacent suspects. Come on, Angela, can you level it with us? Are there any Tories, as you look across on the opposition benches, are there any Tories you'd snog under the mistletoe?
Absolutely not, no. And for people spreading rumours about Dowden, because they were saying that I was flirting with Oliver Dowden, don't think so. It was called an exchange across the dispatch box. And yeah, I had a bit of a giggle. Yeah, fine. And so did he. And I smiled and he smiled, and there was a bit of winking and that. But that's not flirting, you know. And I've no interest. I would never with a Tory anyway. But, you know, it's called banter across the dispatch box. And I'm sick of rumours going around like that anyway. So, no, there's nobody. I wouldn't touch a Tory. No chance. Etonian scum.
You have got a reputation as a bit of a party girl, DJing in Ibiza and so on. Can you tell us what is your favourite Christmas tipple, and have you got a rave in the diary for New Year's Eve?
Well, to be honest, I've got to avoid the sherry now after that episode with Sir Trevor. So that used to be, I just liked a bit of cooking sherry really, but now I think I'll just go back to the Lambrini's, occasional can of Tennant's. Just, that's it really. And I don't have any particular plans. Well, I might do, I don't know. I am waiting to hear back from a mate if he can let me stay in one of his places over the new year. But, you know, I'm not going to set anything in stone. But whatever I do, Alison, will be all above board, and I will declare it.
Yes, well, coming to that, I hear you've just been given the use of John Prescott's swanky old love nest at Admiralty Arch. And how many houses have you now got, Deputy Prime Minister? And are you comfortable with that? Because there was a bit of a difficult business, wasn't there, with you not having declared one of the houses. How is your housing situation at the moment?
Well, right now, all I can do is focus on staying safe in the bunker. And yes, a move is on the cards, and that's absolutely fine. That's what I'll probably be doing in the new year. You know, getting me boxes together and getting myself settled. And, you know, it's not about how many houses you've got. It's about quality of life and experience of travel and understanding that some people have more than others. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everything is how it is supposed to be. Us Labours are, wherever we live, wherever we stay, we are on a learning experience and understanding that an home is a very important thing for you, no matter what your background is. So I hope that answers your question directly.
Yes, it does. Just looking back, you did famously, you and Sakir took the knee in a photograph to the Black Lives Matter protesters. Do you have any regrets looking back at that now? Do you think that was a good thing to do?
I don't know if you know this, but it wasn't just me and Eric here in that picture. There was also Sadiq Our Sadiq, unfortunately, when he actually took the knee, he went completely out of shot. But you can just see the top of his head. But yeah, no, I don't have any regrets over it because it was the right thing to do. And, you know, even though it was something that happened in a different country and we weren't in charge at the time, we just felt it was very important to take a stand, or take a knee, as it was. And we were happy to do that. We don't have any regrets about making that choice because it was defo the right thing to do. I'm just sad that you didn't see our Sadiq quite as clearly in the photo as you did myself and our Kia, but there you go.
Yeah, it must have just slipped.
It's just the top of his head, unfortunately.
Just the top of his head. Now, in your fantastic running show, No Brainer with Angela Rayner, we did learn that the Prime Minister has got you confined in that underground bunker for your own good. And now the gossip, Angela, is that two rival Labour factions, Keir is doing so poorly that these two factions are already planning a leadership bid for the new year 2025. And you, Angela, are said to be the soft left candidate, and Wes Streeting is the Blairite candidate. He's been putting himself about a bit, hasn't he? Do you fancy your chances, Angela? And what could we expect from a Prime Minister Rayner?
Well, I've got to say, Alison, absolutely everything that you've just said is pure misinformation. All of it. Because that's not happening. Our Keir is doing a brilliant job. Everybody, all of us Labour's defo support him. We are all behind him. Our Wes is also doing a brilliant job. He's happy where he is. And I have got absolutely no desire whatsoever to turn me back on the brilliant job I'm doing with the houses to make any bid for anything. You know, I've got a lot to do. I've made a lot of big, bold promises. I've got to think about them comfortable underground ute tents, Alison. They're not going to build themselves. And I can't leave it all to our Ken to do. So that is what my focus is going to be on. You can't be listening to idle gossip and the spreading of misinformation. This is why we've got to put the laws in to shut people up, because people are, you know, where did you hear this? Was it Telegram? Was it Telegram that you heard this? It's just nonsense. It's not true. It's gossip, and nobody is interested in trying to take the crown from Eric Keir, because he is where he needs to be right now, and so are the rest of us Labourers. So it's absolute pure Telegram style misinformation, the usual far right adjacent suspects peddling garbage on Talk TV and GB News, the usual suspects, and people fall for it, but it's not true. We are very happy with the Labour's progress, and there's absolutely no way anybody is going to try and take Eric Keir's. I won't let them anyway.
So we're still reeling from the budget, which a lot of people have said isn't going to all these and Rachel's various taxes on private education, on farmers, all these. I have to say, Angela, they're proving quite unpopular, aren't they? What do you think Labour can do in the new year to try and win back some popularity and possibly even get you out of the underground bunker?
Well, I am defo coming out of the underground bunker. Make no mistake. I'm going onwards and upwards, so you don't need to worry about that. I think it really is not the fault of us Labourers. It is the fault of the far-right adjacents like Clarkson, who's coming in, sticking his nose in and encouraging farmers to go on strike and to start kicking off. There was no need for that. So I think probably the first thing that we're going to do in 2025 is have a little word with Clarkson and ask him what he's playing at, because he's just making things worse. Everybody understands that difficult decisions had to be made because we've got to fix the foundations, Alison. You know, that has to be done first, because if you don't fix the foundations, then you can't build on it. And that is why we're doing what we're doing. And, you know, it's not our fault that we've had 14 years of Tory failure and it's taken this long to start clearing up the mess that the previous government left. But there you go. I mean, we've got to get through dealing with a £22 billion black hole. There's just so much to do, you know? So I can't really remember what the question was, Alison, but I have to say, it's Clarkson's fault. That's the answer.
You've answered it magnificently. I'm just coming to this business with the VAT on private schools, which is causing, Angela, I have to say, people are saying it's not even going to raise very much money, and it's going to cause a lot of children, including special needs children, a lot of difficulty and hardship. Have you got any thoughts about that? Do you think it's all right to disrupt children's school careers and just out of class warfare?
I don't think it's disrupting children. I think it's enriching children because they'll have more friends. If there's kids coming from the fee-paying schools into state schools, think of all the friendships that will be formed by people. It's diversity, isn't it, being our strength? Look at all the different diverse children that will all be together. And I don't see anything wrong with this. I think actually it's the most enriching thing for a child to be moved from, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but maybe a stuffy environment where, you know, you've got to stand up and say yes, miss, and all of that sort of business. You're going into maybe a bit more of a relaxed environment. And, you know, there'll be certain things that they'll learn about life and family and all sorts of things that are very enriching for them. So, and I'm not worried about the special needs element of it because I think, you know, the more kids that are around children with special needs, the louder it gets and the more chaotic. It's probably going to be more fun for them. So, you know, that's what I was thinking anyway. But I'm not the Education Secretary, so you're probably asking the wrong person here. But I don't think it's going to be a problem. And think of all the money that we're going to raise from the extra VAT. It's going to really help. We could probably buy a couple more teachers with that. So it's a good thing. It's all a good thing.
Just asking about another colleague, Ed Miliband, who is causing a lot of controversy at the moment, Angela, with his steaming ahead with his net zero plans, apparently going to be carpeting a lot of the country with, somebody said today, a billion solar panels. I mean, there's not going to be much grass left, is there? What do you think of Ed's trying to hit these net zero targets at a time when we've got the highest energy prices in the developed world?
Well, I mean, we've had to worry more about getting net zero with Ed's ukulele, to be perfectly honest. We have to take it off him. He drives us up the wall with it. He's always coming up with, here's a new song about offshore wind farms. No, Ed, don't. So that's the only net zero that us Labourers are concerned about at the moment, getting rid of his instruments. Look, I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think our Ed is onto something here. Look, if there's land to be used, then we should be using it. Why not? I mean, we're a very hot country with all the climate change happening. So I think we'll get loads of sun. I think it'll work out really well.
Yeah, making me laugh, sorry.
It's no laughing matter. Honestly, you haven't had to sit through one of his ukulele recitals, Alison.
Anyway, Angela, finally, can you leave Planet Normal listeners with some of your New Year's resolutions, just to give them an idea of what the Deputy Prime Minister is going to be trying to do next year?
Well, I've only got one, Alison, and I think it's probably the most important one of all, and that is a promise that us Labourers are going from strength to strength. That's it. Don't need to say any more than that. There's no need for anything more than that. We are just simply going from strength to strength. That's a promise.
Well, Angela, I think, I speak for everyone on Planet Normal. We can't wait to see how this works out, really. But thank you for being an absolutely marvellous guest.
Nice one, thanks.
Happy Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Happy holidays to you, our kid.
Well, Alison, that was absolutely brilliant. I thought you remained superbly deadpan and professional throughout that high-level journalistic interrogation of the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. That was, of course, not Angela Rayner. It was a fantastic comedienne known only as Intel Lady. That's the sobriquet she goes by, and the links to more of her work on YouTube, on TikTok, on X, formerly known as Twitter, can be found in the show notes to this episode. What a Christmas treat for Planet Normal listeners.
Oh, she just makes me laugh, really. I mean, it's quite close to the bone, Liam, isn't it, really?
But it shows the government is losing authority when the government of, a hugely powerful country like the UK is being lampooned so early in its tenure after a landslide election victory, albeit a loveless landslide, as we said earlier. You know that they are in trouble. It's absolutely brutal. And there's so much truth in a lot of what she is saying and getting at. I get the sense, I think objectively you can say that this government is drifting. They are very much falling over their own feet in terms of what they're trying to do. There is huge animosity among lots of the Labour movement, as I said earlier, towards Ed Miliband and the net zero agenda. And some of them at the top, they are pretty robotic. And they seem to be speaking only from a script, as of course Intel Lady does when lampooning Angela Rayner, rather than responding to events in the kind of nimble, thoughtful, courageous way that genuine leadership entails.
Well, it's interesting this week, isn't it, Liam? Because we've seen my other rocket man, the one with the real rocket, not the one made out of
cardboard. My cardboard rocket, crikey, it's more emasculation.
Elon Musk giving a big thumbs up to reform. Nigel Farage flanked by his new treasurer, another billionaire, Nick Candy. And we bumped into them, didn't we, at the Spectator Christmas party, both looking remarkably chipper. Do you have a sense now, co-pilot, of them really now becoming a force to be reckoned with?
Well, we were, I think, pretty much the first mainstream podcast to point out that Reform, with their 5 MPs out of 650, were 7-1 to form the next government. The Lib Dems, with their 72 MPs out of 650, being 100-1. And now Reform on 7-1, they're 5-2, which is, of course, even shorter odds. Quite remarkable. I've said for a long time that Reform will have at least 10, probably 15 MPs at the time of the next election through defections and by-elections. And I know from talking to many people at the top of Reform, with whom I've had lots and lots of conversations over many years, that they are organising like Billio. Nigel's whole modus operandi now, plus that of Zia Youssef, the very impressive young chairman of Reform, a self-made entrepreneur who has plenty of money and a lot of professional experience. We interviewed him on Planet Normal, of course, several months ago. They want to get like the Lib Dems. And what do the Lib Dems do? They target particular seats. While Reform will run properly vetted candidates in each of the constituencies, Nigel's pledged to do that at the time of the next election, they will focus their now increasingly considerable resources on particular seats in order to try and get over the line in this first past the post system and become a major political force. I do think Labour are completely unaware that Reform are eating their lunch, what remains of their lunch, in the Red Wall. And I do think, I have to say, the Conservatives are also complacent about what Reform are doing and the threat that they pose. As immigration becomes an ever more important topic in the mind of the electorate, even moderate voters are outraged at the pace now of immigration. And as also net zero becomes something that is increasingly economically damaging, while leading to very, very high electricity prices. We've most months got the highest electricity prices in Europe. Only Germany sometimes is higher, and they, of course, got rid of all their nukes for ridiculous reasons in the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster. We are seeing these two big campaigning issues very much falling into Nigel Farage's lap, and he knows how to campaign, and he is a formidable communicator and operator, and the mainstream parties need to get real about what they are saying in order to at least address, let alone counter, what Reform are saying. They're odds on to win the next election.
I don't see any alternative to the Conservatives and Reform doing a deal going into the next election. I just think it's inevitable. And however much the Conservatives may try to pretend that they're above that or that won't be necessary, that will be absolutely necessary. And I remember during the general election over the summer when Suella Braverman, who has a constituency in Leafy, Hampshire, and she texted me and she said, every other street in Fareham was Reform. Every other street, all right? So Suella's husband obviously has just gone off to Reform. I don't think she's going anytime soon.
So they are going to come on Planet Normal in the new year, aren't they? As a couple.
They are going to come on as Mr. and Mrs. Yeah, and I know I've been flagging this up in my own homeland. We will. I think this is going to be incredibly interesting and pivotal. So 2026 is the Senedd elections in Wales, and I think Reform could win 17, maybe as many as 20 seats. There are 40 members of the Senedd, Liam.
Wow.
And I mean, there are 60 members overall, but the 20 represent the 5 electoral regions of Wales. And I think that if that happens, and there's no reason why, because Reform came a very close second in many constituencies, including in Llanelli, which is where I'm from. And if that happens, if that implacable socialist citadel, which has inflicted such misery, such low standards on my homeland, such a trashed one of the best education systems in the world, ended up with the worst part of the National Health Service is NHS Wales. I mean, you better book if I die in 5 years, I better book an ambulance now because that's not coming until then if you're in Wales. So I think, and my prediction would be, and let's keep an eye out, Planet Normal listeners, because I think that Senedd election coming up to the general election will send shockwaves through Labour, because if Labour comes close to losing Wales, then it's astonishing. It's really a dam breaking, really. And we could see that then, I think, having an extraordinary effect across the country.
Now on to our listener emails, the last batch of Planet Normal emails to be read out in 2024. Your messages sent to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming, because Alison and I learned so much from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
We had some fantastic reaction to last week's interview with a dynamic duo from Save the Parish, Emma Thompson and Admiral Sir James Burnell Nugent. This is from Richard. As a fellow traveller on the rocket of right thinking, I was pleased to share a seat in steerage with the Admiral and Mrs. Emma Thompson, whom you interviewed this week. As an ordained Anglican priest of 30 years standing, who has led parishes and is still licensed in the Carlisle Diocese, I fully endorse everything our fellow rocketeers are saying and doing about the top-heavy Anglican bureaucracy. My experience of the church is that the hierarchy have, generally speaking, lost touch with their entire raison d'etre of being in the church, to worship God, make him known to people, and practice the love of God on earth. The majority of our 116 bishops in England are now preoccupied with shallow, woke ideologies, DEI, pushing net zero, the events in Gaza, but not Israel, of course, decolonising the church, inclusive liturgy, such as using the term eternal mother, etc. This was most grievously emphasised when in March this year, the bishops announced a £1 billion fund to be set aside for slavery reparations from the church commissioners, as if the church was awash with money to fritter on imaginary problems. Plus, ignoring the fact that the 1807 Abolition of Slavery Act was brought about primarily by the efforts of committed Anglicans like William Wilberforce, Sir Henry Thornton and Dr. Porteous, the then Bishop of London. Woke seems a far more attractive ideology for them to live by now, rather than the dowdy Christian narrative. So hats off, says Richard, to Save the Parish. I believe local Christians are taking matters into their own hands. To encourage faith in their neighbourhoods is the future of the church in this country, and the sooner the bloated hierarchy of the C of E is challenged, the better. All the congregations of whatever denomination that are growing are well aware that we are there to serve the local population, not some metropolitan political hierarchy. Alison, says Richard, we want you to know we were praying for you regularly during your Essex Gate experience and are 100% behind your campaign to remove non-crime hate incidents forever. Well, thank you very much for that, Reverend Richard. And let's just say, Liam, I think this localism is a growing theme. I think people wresting back control from a sort of metropolitan centre that is, as the police, as the church, as the civil service, obsessed with concerns which the majority of people think are absolutely barking.
This is from Simon. Dear Alison and Liam, thank you for your podcast. You're welcome. It keeps me sane and fit. Us too. The latter because it's my treat to listen to when I go to the gym, and without the treat, I wouldn't go. In 2022, I watched the gilt market blow up. Hooray! A man after my own heart, watching the financial markets, mainly because of LDI, which are those very heavily levered, debt-infused investments. I'd been in the city for 30 years and was buying gilts at what I thought might be their low point. I noticed that there was scarce information of them available to non-city folk, so I hastily threw together a Google site and called it YieldGimp, why not, .com. Due to my development inadequacies, I'm afraid the website looks terrible unless viewed on a desktop. Despite its niche name, it began to attract a number of users during the busy budget periods, and that was enough for me. However, I have recently had a little more time on my hands after leaving the city and thought I'd turn YieldGimp.com into YieldGimp, the iPhone app. So there it is. Anyway, I mention it because unless you subscribe to Bloomberg or something similar, it can be hard to find out what's happening to gilt yields. It can indeed. I now realise that Alison almost likes talking about gilt yields as much as Liam does. I'm afraid that to qualify as a proper yield gimp, you have to think about yields hourly. My God, it would be give me great pleasure if you, the team of Reason, found my app a useful tool to peek at gilt yields whilst on the hoof, or when Rachel from accounts drops the teapot. Please keep up the good work. I'm afraid it's all too late, but someone has to hold the buggers to account. And there's a very serious point here, Alison. I go on and on about gilt yields because that is the cost of borrowing that really counts. What the Bank of England is obviously massively heralded by the media, but we have the Bank of England trying to lower interest rates, and we have the market raising interest rates, and guess what? The market always wins.
Simon's right, of course. The bond market seldom far from my mind. And one day I'll find out what they are. This is from Charlie. Dear Alison and Liam, I want to thank you both for everything you do and say in your capacity as two of the leading journalists in the UK. Hooray! Planet Normal is the #1 political current events podcast. Have we paid this man? And all of the energy that you both put into it is enormously valuable in highlighting the endless number of woes evident in this country. Woes brought about by the self-destructive tendencies of our political class over the last 30 years. Our civil service, our police, our health service, and it would now seem our church are weighed down by top-heavy bureaucracy. Once great institutions are crippled by useless, bone-idle individuals who spend their lives creating work without ever achieving anything other than more pointless rules and regulation. All of this brings us to where we are now, in broken Britain. It seems as if we are a basket case, says Charlie. No better exemplified than by this morning's Daily Telegraph. It took me all of the first 46 pages before I got to a piece of common sense, namely that puberty blockers are to be banned. But I was close to slashing my wrists by then. Charlie says, just to give a flavour of the first 46 pages, Big Ange going to introduce Soviet planning policy all over the green belt. We continue to import foreigners with cultural differences. Police want to work from home and are planning to strike in order to be granted their wish. The public sector is getting a 2.8% pay increase. A 20% pay cut may be more commensurate, says Charlie. Robert Jenrick says he wants to deport foreign criminals to ease overcrowding in jails. Bloody brilliant, mate. You had 12 years to enact that, and it's taken until now to think about it. I no longer watch mainstream TV, says Charlie. I rely on the Telegraph, Spectator, Planet Normal, and a couple of other excellent ones for all my news. I'm also a member of the Free Speech Union and now the Reform Party. Oh, well, that's a bit of a trend, Charlie. Come the day, I suspect I will be on the first train to the Gulag. Well, we'll be with you, Charlie. See you there. Yes, exactly. Have a lovely Christmas both and a very healthy New Year. Warmest good wishes to you both, Charlie.
And Alison, it wouldn't be a Planet Normal landmark edition without Bob the Bard weighing in.
Oh, yay!
Among a fleet of massive Planet Normal poet geniuses. Bob, did they come in fleets? Not really. a coterie. There you go.
You know, there's a big call for Bob the Bard Lou book.
That's right.
So that could be coming. Planet Normal lavatory book, Bob the Bard.
He's weighed in again. Bob the Bard, he writes, the decorations are up. The mince pies are ready. All we need now is a perfect Christmas is a festive song about non-crime hate incidents, of course. Thanks again for Planet Normal. Merry Christmas, says Bob the Bard, and Happy New Year, Bob, former bug winner, not his real name. And this is to be read out or sung even to the tune of Santa's Claus is coming to town. You ready? You better watch out. You better beware. There's snoopers and snitches everywhere. Starmer's cops are coming to town. They're making a list. They're coming for you. If they don't quite share your views, Starmer's cops are coming to town. They know what you've been posting. They're watching everything. They'll knock upon your door if they suspect that you're right wing. You better watch out. You better beware. There's snoopers and snitches everywhere. Starmer's cops are coming to town. They've lost the plot. They're out of control. They're making up laws. They're in control. Starmer's cops are coming to town. So if you've been affected, just give Alison a shout.
Yay!
She knows what you are going through, and she will help you out all together now. So you better watch out. You better beware.
The snoopers and snitches everywhere.
Starmer's cops are coming to town. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is why Bob the Bard is the Planet Normal supreme poet of 2024. And I have to say, he's in with a damn good shout for 2025. Unless his competitors get in there. Come on, guys. He's got the crown. Where's your self-respect?
He's better than most poet laureates, isn't he, really?
Better than we can do.
This poet laureate says Alfred Lord Tennyson. I just want to say it has been a bit of a bumpy old year on the rocket for both of us personally in various ways, but we are always consoled.
We're fixing ourselves, though, aren't we? We're fixing ourselves.
We're fixing ourselves.
We're getting better.
We are. We're getting better. We are getting better. But what never lets us down is the fantastic intelligence, insight, good humour
of Isabel Boujard and Cass Ho.
Yes, them as well. Yes, the two amazing women who somehow keep the rocket burning brightly. But yeah, seriously, we love the listeners and we feel loved. And I certainly felt loved during my non-crime hate incident. And it's rare. It's really rare in this world. And we never take it for granted. And we always say how lucky we are to have Planet Normal listeners. And let's hope that we can meet up sometime in the new year and have another Planet Normal live event. But everybody, I hope, just have an absolutely lovely Christmas and Happy New Year too.
A live event in the north of England, perhaps.
Oh.
It's in the offing.
Yeah.
And that's it from Planet Normal for another week as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason, our flying refuge of reasoned views. Email of the week, Alison, I have to hand it to you, chivalrous co-pilot that I am.
Oh, can we give Bob another one? Because it's
he's got a shelf, he's got more mugs than we have. He's formed a website on the dark web, punting them out for Bitcoin.
Yes, email of the week is going to go to Simon, not least for his acute recognition of my mastery of the bond markets. Thank you, Simon. Time another economist got some attention around here.
It's a close race between the two of us, Alison. I am quaking in my boots. Please send us an email at planetnormaltelegraph.co.uk. Simon put mug winner on the subject heading, and the Planet Normal mug will wing its way to you if you send us your postal address. And a quick housekeeping note before we disappear into the ether for the rest of 2024. This is the last Planet Normal of 2024. Thanks, as Alison says, to sticking with us throughout the year. Tell your friends what a fantastic time we have here on the Rocket I've Right Thinking, the flying refuge of reasoned views. Alison and I will be back on the morning of Thursday, January the 9th. But in the meantime, there will be Christmas specials, the best of Planet Normal 2024, put together by Cass, Izzy and the Planet Normal team. And as we speed away from our beloved Planet Normal, and the madness of Planet Earth comes back into view, thanks as ever to our producers Isabel Bouchard, Cass Ho and Louisa Wells. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next year, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him. Happy New Year.